Hello, my name's David Diley, welcome to the Scarlet View, and today we're going to be looking at something very, very special. The first ever underwater footage from the Panasonic EVA1. As a professional underwater cinematographer who desperately needs to upgrade his camera setup, I can tell you two things. One, it's very expensive, and two, it's very frustrating. And the reason it's frustrating is because you keep an eye on all the new camera releases coming out, you look at the specs, you check the footage out, everything ticks all the boxes, and then you find out there's not going to be a housing for it. So you have to shelve it, it's not an option anymore. When the Panasonic EVA1 was announced, and I looked at the specs, it certainly ticked all the boxes. Then I saw the first bits of footage coming out, and that ticked all the boxes. Then I actually got my hands on some footage to work on as a colorist and did some digital grading with it, and was not only impressed with how good the footage was out of the box, I was also really impressed with how well it handled being pushed in a grade. So for me, it looked at that point like the Panasonic EVA1 could be the absolute game changer for mid-range underwater cinematographers like myself. But you never really know until you actually see how that camera performs underwater. Now, luckily, a friend of mine, Rich Stevenson, has just bought one and rang me out of the blue last week, or the week before, to say that he had rigged up his Gates Red Epic housing to accommodate the EVA1 to do some test shots with to see how it performed underwater. And he called me to say, can I send you the footage so you can do some grading on it, really push it in post, see how it handles it, just so we can look at the feasibility of this camera as an underwater broadcast unit. So he sent me the footage, I put it into Resolve, put it through Premiere Pro, and we're going to take a look now at the first ever underwater footage from the Panasonic EVA1 and ask the question, is this the ultimate game changer for underwater cinematographers? Okay, so we're in DaVinci Resolve Studio 14, and you can see we've got 4 clips here from the EVA1, which Richie shot underwater at Vobster here in the UK, which is an inland quarry, which explains why the visibility and the colour of the water is so terrible. But this is a really good scenario in which to check how well a camera performs underwater. If it performs well in less than ideal conditions like this, then you can be pretty much guaranteed that it's going to perform extremely well when you're in the South Pacific or in the Southern Red Sea with 50 meters of visibility in clear blue water. So this is why we wanted to do this as a test. And looking at the footage now, if we go into full screen mode, this is coming from my 2K calibrated grading monitor, and it's nice and sharp, it looks good. Not overly sharp, which is nice, which I like. And if we look at the settings, we're in 4K, 25 frames a second. This was shot in Vlog. Now, this was also shot using the 400 megabits All-Intra Codec, which came out in the most recent firmware update. So I'm interested to see how that holds up to being pushed in post. We have the shutter angle at 180 degrees. The ISO on this first clip is at the base native of 800. We've got 5600 white balance, and we are wide open at f4 on a Canon 11-24 lens. Now, the third clip here is at the base ISO of 2500 with all the other settings remaining the same. So what I'm going to do is, this first clip was taken and recorded into the Shogun Flame. The second clip is the same shot but the internal recording. Third clip, again, is into the Shogun Flame, but at the base ISO of 2500. And the fourth clip is the same as the third clip, but again, the internal recording. So I hope that makes sense. All of these filmed with that 400 megabits All-Intra Codec. So what did I want to see? First of all, on the raw file, I wanted to have a look and see how much noise we've got in there. This shot is slightly underexposed, again, which is a good testing point. I don't know how well this is coming over on YouTube compression, but there is noise in there. It's not horrible, blocky DSLR noise. It's actually, the noise isn't too bad at all. it's more of a grainy noise. So I'm not overly concerned about that because it does make it easier to remove it in post. On the internal recording, what's the noise like? A bit more compressed, a little bit more obvious for my eye. But there seems to be more contrast in the noise on the Shogun. So we'll see how that copes with it in post anyway. So what I actually did was do short, down and dirty 5-minute grade on this clip and on this clip, and then I copied the grade from the first clip to the second, and then copied the grade from the third clip to the fourth, because obviously the lighting and exposure is very different. I had to grade them independently so we get some kind of match. So looking at the grade on this first clip, first thing I did actually was I changed the log space. So I went from V-Log into Arri Log C using Color Space Transform, then did a balance from there. Green obviously being the very dominant color, removed a lot of that by pushing the magentas a little bit. Obviously worked with the contrast, bringing the shadows down a little bit to give it a bit more of a punchy look with the saturation. Not overly keen on the color of the water, so in the third node I changed that and brought that down a little bit. I wanted a more moody, darker look to it. I then did corrections to that to give it a more filmic look, so used the film stock and then made corrections on that film stock again, just to give it that slightly desaturated, dark filmic look, which I do really quite like. And then did some final desaturation at the end. If you can hear my stomach, I do apologize, I've not actually eaten today. That is next on my to-do list. So let's have a look at the in full screen. So this is the graded image and this is the flat image. Big difference, but it does handle it well. It handles it really well. If we come out of full screen and see if we can see any differences between the Shogun and the internal recording, there is a difference. Let's see if you can spot it. We should probably turn the grade on. There we go. Let's see if you can spot it first of all. So this is the internal, and this is to the external recorder, the Shogun. Okay, the big difference that I noticed, let's take those clips out so we can make this bigger, is if we look at the wheel in the shadows there, that's on the Shogun and that is internal. So there's more noise in the red channel internally, and it also seems to have a much more warmer bias in the shadows than the Shogun does, and it's pretty apparent there. So that's a big difference. So for me, between the Shogun and the internal, from that clip, the Shogun wins, but I do think the internal handles it very well, and it's not fallen apart in the grade yet, which is good. So clip 3, as I said, different exposure. This was exposed better in camera. If we have a look at the ISO there at 2500, being wide open on the auto iris, Richie did say that at the base ISO of 2500, he got about half to 1 full stop of extra light on that ISO. So that's probably helps explain why the exposure is kind of more close to what we want on this. So instead of doing color space transform and working from Arri Log C, I worked from V-Log, did a balance. After the balance, I wanted to correct that water. After correcting the water, we then applied a film stock, and then I did some corrections within that film stock, and then did a desaturation again. So that's completely clear, and that's with the grade. So clear, flat, and then graded. So if we look at that full screen, again, that looks pretty good. I'm really quite pleased with that. If we go in and look at the amount of noise that's in there, again, it's nothing that isn't manageable in post. If we apply the grays to the internal recording, let's see if there's any difference. Again, I am definitely seeing a difference there. So if we look at this side of the wheelhouse on the internal recording, it has more of a magenta hue to it than on the Shogun Flame. The color representation on the Shogun is better than internally, from these clips at least anyway. However, again, it matches pretty well. The Shogun seems a little bit sharper as well. Yeah, I think the Shogun's slightly sharper. But again, it looks good. It looks really good. In terms of matching the two together, it's pretty close. It's not too bad. If we look at this, full screen, I think that looks quite nice. And then if we look at clip 3, full screen, I'm pretty happy with that. I have to say, I really didn't come and encounter any problems in the grade with the footage at all. None at all. Even when making selections. So for the water, if we turn that on, obviously you can see, you can see that's been blurred out a lot, but you can see where the noise is. But the selection of the footage in terms of specific colors was really good, actually. It was really, really good. So yeah, so that's the grading side of it done. I'm going to pop that into Premiere, do some denoising, do some sharpening, add a little bit of film grain in there so we get the final look. And we'll see what it looks like when we put the little edit together of all the clips I got from Richie towards the end of the video. So I hope this has been helpful. Okay, so we're in Premiere. We've got the 4 clips now, so we're going to drag them into a timeline. We'll get rid of the audio. We don't need the audio. And what I'm going to do is, with these first 2 clips here, the one of the car, I'm going to apply denoising, sharpening, and some film grain to both of these to see what kind of difference we see, if any. So let's take a look. So starting off, we'll open up Neat Video. That's the noise reduction software that I use. Just in my experience, I've found that it's the best one that I've found by a long way. Certainly seems to be the most effective and provides the best results. So here, obviously, we've got a lot of noise. There's some slight fixed pattern noise in there as well, but I'm not overly concerned about that. I mean, this shot was underexposed and was pushed quite heavily in the grade. So we'll make a big selection, no problem with that at all. Obviously, it's telling me that there is a lot of noise in it. We're going to auto profile and just use the default setting. Make a fine tune. There we go. Original, filtered. That's done a really good job of it. So obviously I don't know how well you can kind of see that on YouTube with the compression, but fingers crossed that did come across for you. So we're going to do exactly the same thing, but do it manually again. Open up Neat Video. Now the noise, the fixed noise, seems more apparent on the internal recording. It's going to make a big selection, and it's giving me a different noise level. It's saying that the clip which was recorded by the by the Shogun Flame has got more noise in it, which is interesting. So this is also, it wasn't making as good a selection there, but so let's see. So obviously the noise is going to be worse down in these parts. Can we get it? Okay, yeah, so we can. So that's where the highest level of noise is going to be in this shot. We'll take a reading. It's taking a good reading. We'll fine tune it, denoise it. Done. So the original, and denoised. So what I'm going to do next is apply some sharpening, and again I'm going to use a different tool than within Resolve. Unsharp mask is something that, again, I find the results with it to be generally quite a lot better than the sharpening in Resolve. So we won't go too far with it, but the amount is 65 and the radius to 1.4. And what we're going to do is copy that over onto the next clip. And then finally, we're going to add some film grain in there as well. We're using Film Convert Pro for this. Make sure we don't get any colour in there. And that's 0. And then I think probably about, I would say 35%. I'm going to copy that and paste it onto the next clip, and then I am going to render, and then we're going to have a look at them. Okay, so we've added the denoising, the sharpening and the film grain now. It's been rendered out. So let's have a look at the footage on here when we add each effect in separately. So the denoising, then the sharpening, if we look at the corners down here, there we go, and then the film grain as well. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that what you're looking at on this screen, it's a 4K project. The screen capture is coming from my 2K grading monitor, and this is actually only the render preview within Premiere Pro, so this is really heavily compressed. When you're actually watching this on YouTube, this will have been downscaled down to 1080p, so it matches the C100 that I film my little pieces to camera on. But you will see the quality in there, and it just looks really good. I'm very impressed with it as an underwater camera. So if we just play through these clips, it might be a little bit stuttery in parts, but it looks really good. I mean, the Shogun recording, for me, for my eye, is better than the internal. There is definitely a difference. If we look, there's much more magenta hue. Particularly if we look at the car, there's more heavy leaning towards magenta on the internal recording than on the Shogun. I think the Shogun does look better, but the internal codec, the internal recording, it still looks great. This is not ideal conditions to film in, particularly underwater. In fact, you know, if the conditions were much worse than this, there probably wouldn't be a great deal of point in filming, but still the image comes out looking really good. It's very clean, very nice, sharp but not too sharp. The color reproduction is excellent, and yeah, I'm really impressed. So from looking at the footage, I have to say I am really impressed. For the camera to perform so well in such difficult conditions is a really good indicator of how well it's going to perform when the conditions are ideal. Is it the camera for me though? At the moment, it's certainly the front runner. I think if the Terra 4K had a housing, then that would make my choice a bit more difficult, because I think the Terra 4K would be a phenomenal underwater camera. But at the moment, there is no housing, and I really don't think there's gonna be a housing in the future. So that probably removes that from the running. I would like to see some more underwater footage from the EVA1, and Richie has said that he's probably going to be sending me some in the not too distant future. So thanks again, Richie Stevenson, for providing all the underwater footage for this episode. Really appreciate it. What do you think? For me, it certainly seems to tick all the boxes, but how about you? Have you got an EVA1 already? Are you looking to get one? If you've got one, are you thinking of taking it underwater? Please let me know in the comments below. Hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I'm going to leave you now with a little edit of the clips that Richie sent over with the grade on, so you can get a good idea of how the footage looks. Now, it's 4K native, and it's been downscaled into 1080p to match the C100. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you again next time.